I talked about the debated topics forum, which is going to be the main venue where that topic can be discussed. The purpose of the debated topics forum is that it is lightly moderated, essentially to make sure that what's written in papers is like civil and respectful, and that it's in like English that can be understood, basically, and let's say coherent thoughts and arguments on paper. That's pretty much the threshold to be published in the debated topics forum. So there's not going to be anybody. The idea is that nobody is refereeing or peer reviewing and deciding what should or shouldn't be published. And then to be very frank about it, the person who's going to review it just for meeting those basic thresholds is James Gorley, personally he does not have a position on what did or did not at the Pentagon. He has
really?
not, to my knowledge, he doesn't. If he does,
that's news to me. I thought he did.
If he does have it, I don't think that disqualifies him anyway from serving the purpose of just reviewing the papers, for these minimal requirements. The goal of the forum is to be a place for people who disagree to discuss the topic directly and to have to respond to each other if they and so the idea is that if somebody writes a paper, whether it's you or whether it's David or somebody else, that anybody else can respond.
Hey, good evening, guys. This is going to be the last installment of the critique of the Ted Walters, 3 of the 10 points that he raises on the International Center for 9/11 Justice. And I think this one is really just I think it was poorly described on Ted Walters' part and the board regarding the piloting of the planes. And they rely on 3 points of the evidence against the piloting of the planes. And boy, they really didn't think out this one. So without further ado, point 3, the piloting of the airplanes. It is virtually impossible that the alleged hijackers, known to be marginally trained and barely competent pilots, could have successfully navigated to specific points using the airplane's navigation systems, then maneuvered the airplanes at high speeds into the Twin Towers in the Pentagon. According to Lieutenant Colonel David Gapp, 31-year U.S. Air Force veteran and former president of the Aircraft Accident Board, professional pilot in a simulator has a 1 in 3 chance of striking the Twin Towers. Lieutenant Colonel Gapp and many other pilots have also stated that Hani Hanjour, the alleged hijacker pilot of Flight 77, would have had no chance of executing the reported flight path into the Pentagon. Ultimately, the evidence points to the airplanes having been piloted by individuals other than the alleged hijackers or under computer control, technology that existed before 9/11. Now, as you can see, recommended sources for further study are a link from the 9/11 Consensus Panel, a link from the Journal of 9/11 Studies, and a speech by Lieutenant Colonel David Gapp. Now, I'm going to point to all 3 of their sources and show you that all 3 of their sources are generally coming from their own opinion. And this is the problem with truth movements. When they investigate a piece of history, they're looking at it through a narrow view of history because they have a preconceived worldview, a biased worldview, because they immediately say that the government is lying. They didn't prove that the government's lying. They only looked at information where they can facilitate that worldview. So let's go back to the website, right? Let's go back. So the first link where it says recommended sources for further study, Pentagon point 8, the claim regarding Hani Hanjour for Flight 77 pilot, the 9/11 Consensus Panel. When you click on it, this is what comes up. Nothing. It's a dead link. None to show you. So that's wrong. Now, plausibility of 9/11 aircraft attacks generated by GPS-guided aircraft autopilot systems. Journal of 9/11 Studies. When you click on that, this comes up. It's a article written by Aidan Monahan. I've heard of him. October 2008. Plausibility of 9/11 aircraft attacks generated by GPS-guided aircraft autopilot systems. New supporting evidence is presented and footnoted. The alleged flight performances of inexperienced terrorist pilots accused of operating complex flight control systems of 4 aircraft during the terrorist attacks has surprised observers. The observers being the 9/11 consensus panel. Now, when you go over to the page, right, the evidence is this: unreliable official evidence. Now, this is what they're using as evidence. Because, now I'll upload up again. Because the flight data recorders for 11 and 175 were not recovered, details regarding the operation of each aircraft are not known. Not realizing that you don't need the flight data recorder to know what's happening. We have radar, you know. The flight data recorders for 7793 were recovered and indicate pilot control of each aircraft. However, the FDR readout file for American Flight 77 was completed 4 hours and 15 minutes before the said FDR was recovered, suggesting false or altered FDR information. Now, that's untrue, because this example was brought up by Warren Stutt at the Colorado Pentagon presentation. This was, what, 2018, 19, I think, where you had David Chandler, Wayne Costi, Warren Stutt, Fran Shore, and I forgot the other guy's name, forgive me, that did these studies. Now, this claim is coming from who? The Pilots for 9/11 Truth, a defunct organization with the lead guy, Rob Balsamo, passing away a couple of years ago. But they were no planers, no hijackers, right? You know, cares about what this, 4-man group said. The FDRs for American Airlines Flight 773 were virtually the only ones during the previous 20 years of major, and we got to cross over. National Transportation Board, U.S. Aviation Mishap investigations for which unique inventory control serial numbers were not published. And I'm going to disprove that. Such serial numbers are required to facilitate FDR data readouts. In fact, the NTSB possesses no records pertaining to the positive identification for Flight 77 and Flight 93, right? Now, I'm going to click that out. Here is the National Transportation Safety Board flight path study, February 19th. So this is 6 years prior to his paper, right? Blow it up. NTSB number DC A01MA064. This is the radar readout. Even though the flight data record was not recovered for 77, or was recovered, was too damaged. That's not the only way to identify a plane. This is the radar. The flight path study radar. Okay, I'll upload up again. This document provides a brief description of the flight path of the aircraft on information obtained from various sources of recorded radar of the subjected aircraft both before and after the hijacking events. Information from the flight data recorder recovered on scene is also used to develop the description. Flight paths are overlaid onto maps of the area, and time histories of altitude data are presented. The following description of Flight 77 is based on data from the flight data recorder recovered from the crash site, as well as radar data obtained from the Federal Aviation's Air Route Traffic Control Center at Dulles. I wonder why Aidan Monahan didn't describe this in his paper, because the 9/11 consensus panel were biased. They wanted you to be misled, thinking that they're only looking at limited information because they already had a biased worldview of 9/11. This is why they're not investigators. Same thing for Ted Walton. Same thing for the International Center for 9/11 Justice. And David Chandler's on that board. Why? Why is he supporting this nonsense? This goes against the work that he makes. And Ted Walton has the nerve to basically say, we don't touch Flight 7793. Yet, here they are supporting this nonsense. Why? Because Ted Walter has a limited view of 9/11. Ground zero or nothing. Same thing for Kevin Ryan, Elizabeth Woodworth, and who knows who else is on that board. Piers Robinson, I don't know the guy. Already they're up to a horrible start, right? David Gapp. Who in God's green earth is David Gapp? So, when I looked up this person, David Gapp, would you be surprised? Little is out there regarding this man. So I Googled Lieutenant Colonel David Gapp. This is what I got. Here. 85,500 results for Lieutenant Colonel David Gapp. A Reddit article, a LinkedIn. What does this come up as? Not even the same guy. not even him. A YouTube video. A Google site, which is not even a pic, it's a picture. Retired Air Force pilot about stolen plane in Seattle. Twitter by Dylan Avery, no shocker. A blogger, Lieutenant Dave Gapp, which is just basically, and then after that, site 9/11 Conspiracy, Shalom Shealy, whatever that is, and then the bottom drops out, nothing. Here's their site, International Center on 9/11 Justice, right? After that, look at this, nothing. Military record, no nothing. I'm not saying he's not a real person, but as you can see, I'm going to keep going down. Nothing. More results. Let's keep going. Right? Let's keep going. 9/11 Deception and False Flag Terror. Well, let's see who wrote this book. Terrence Smart. Paperback. 2019. Nothing. No, I mean, yeah. Okay. So that's their expert. Right? That's their expert. I don't even know who this is. I don't know what he is. I don't know who he is. Why did they pull this guy out? Why didn't they go to the largest airline union, the AIA? Right? Why don't you do that? Why don't you go to the tens of thousands of pilots who have no problem with these hijacking of planes? You went to the one guy, just like how truthers go to April Gallup for no plane at the Pentagon. Meanwhile, she was inside the building. You didn't bother with the 100 people outside the building who saw it. And basically lied in court because she sued Osama bin Laden and American Airlines because she said, well, if the other situation is true, I'm still a victim. You know what she was about, right? David Gapp. And David Gapp actually says the reason why is because he doesn't believe because he couldn't do it. So because he couldn't do it, that means Hani Hanjour couldn't do it, right? Now, again, from Ted Walter's own site, it says, let's go back. It is virtually impossible that the alleged hijackers, known to be marginally trained and barely competent pilots, could have successfully navigated to specific points using the airplane's navigation systems and then maneuvered the airplanes at high speeds and stored twin towers in the Pentagon. Right? And all their points are saying, and including David Gapp, right? I'm not going to show you the whole video. It's like an 8-minute video where he says that Hani Hanjour was a terrible pilot and that the much like Loose Change, where they interviewed Marcel Bernard and didn't show the whole interview, and I'm going to crush that right away, where he basically says, yeah, he had a certificate, but he wasn't a very good pilot. And they stopped right there. And they said, oh, see, he's not a good pilot and stuff. And then they attributed words to him that he never said. Now, let me go to the video of Marcel Bernard at a younger age. And this actually was in 2001. And let's see what he says. Because to me, you know, this is actually huge, right? So let's stop. All right, let's stop here. And then let's go here.
It was 5 weeks ago at the Freeway Airport in Bowie. According to Marcel Bernard, the chief instructor here, a young man named Hani Hanjour showed up in search of a small plane to rent. He first had to prove his skill to the flight school's instructors.
We flew 3 separate occasions, second week of August, in about a week's period. After those 3 flights, the instructors that had flown with him had informed him that his skills were so poor overall that they were going to insist that he do more flight training with us before we'd let him rent our aircraft.
Last Tuesday, federal authorities say Hanjour was one of the hijackers that commandeered the American Airlines flight out of Dulles and slammed it into the Pentagon. When his name became public, the flight instructors at Freeway Airport recognized it and notified the FBI. Bernard says Hanjour produced a logbook showing he had 600 flight hours, a pilot's license. The address he gave, Bernard says, belonged to a Laurel hotel. Despite his poor skills, Bernard says Hanjour knew enough about handling a small plane to accomplish last Tuesday's horrific mission using a Boeing 757.
It's certainly different, but I believe that with the experience he had, once the airplane or a jet was airborne, if he decided to take over, that I think could easily point it in the direction he wanted to and do the damage that he did. Obviously, landing's a whole other thing, but I don't think that was his intent, obviously.
The flight school is just the latest link.
So, bingo. Well, how about that, right? That's not loose change. And as you can see, it's not into the International Center for 9/11 Justice because they're not real investigators. They want you to be misinformed. They want you to believe a certain view of 9/11 which doesn't agree with them. They don't care about being honest. They don't care about evidence. They want a select view of 9/11. So they're not researchers. They're not honest journalists, not honest reporters, not honest investigators. Point blank. And let me add an article about Hani Hanjour, right? So this article is from the New York Times, June 19, 2002. Traces of terror. The FBI agent in Phoenix, the cause of many frustrations extended to his own office. Now, but you go all the way down, right? And I'll go right over here, right here. He wasn't very committed, said a former flight instructor who worked with him. It took him almost a good 3 or 4 years to finish whatever he was doing. Inside the cockpit, the former instructor said Mr. Hanjour was unsure of himself, even frightened, particularly during mandatory stalling exercises in which an engine is turned off so that a pilot can practice righting the plane and restoring power. The instructor said he reassured Mr. Hanjour that we're not going to fall out of the sky as long as we have wings. But he was very scared, the instructor added. He felt very hesitant. He was not one I would send my wife and kids with. Yet through accumulation of flying hours, Mr. Hanjour apparently built his competency. By the spring of '99, that's 2 years prior to 9/11, seeking a commercial license, he was training on simulators at another school and doing pretty well, the former instructor said. I wonder why that's not into the International Center for 9/11 Justice. I wonder why that's not loose change. I know why. On April 15, 1999, he earned a satisfactory rating by an examiner from the Federal Aviation Administration, was awarded a commercial license with a multi-engine rating. Well, how about that, right? That's not into the International Center for 9/11 Justice, and that's the reason why they used an outdated 15-year-old paper that has no relevancy to today, and also a dead link from the 9/11 Consensus Panel, and also some guy that you never heard of that barely comes up on a search engine on Google. That's their evidence against for hijackers on these planes. They failed magnificently. And you wonder why people like me have to do these videos when I shouldn't, to make sure that the public is properly reported responsibly, because you'll have truth organizations like this that persuade an audience to look at a certain worldview of 9/11 that's based on their own opinions or their own biased worldviews. This is why I'm a little bit pissed off, because I've had enough of this nonsense. And if Ted Walters watching this, hey, listen, I'm willing to talk with you, but I doubt sincerely you'll change your mind, because that would mean that you have to cut certain people out of your life. And if you're just for the truth, you'll do that. But if you're for something else, you're definitely not going to do that. That means you have to change your perception about what took place on September 11, 2001. And so far, you're batting 0. All 3 points that you raised of the 10 points are refuted. And it was pretty easy to do it. Even a layman could do it. And if a layman could do it, and you have so-called experts on your board, well, it's time to start questioning those experts and yourself. And that's the end of this 3-part series. And enjoy your weekend, and I'll see you in the next video.